We don't give people the chance to really digest and learn from what they just experience. That sacred moment, it would be wonderful if as a culture we could say, that's where the gold is.
We are on an episode of Going Interior, podcast about doing hard jobs and living well. I'm Jamie Kavanaugh, your host. I'm a captain paramedic at the Grand Junction Fire Department and peer support team coordinator. I'm joined today by Kevin Watt. Kevin's a hospice chaplain, spiritual counselor, and meditation teacher. I'm excited to talk about all those things. But in Kevin's bio, he weaves together these threads of spirituality and philosophical traditions and invites those he serves to explore and articulate their own unique beliefs, doubts, and needs. Kevin's broad spiritual background and trainings helps him to effectively work with people of all faiths, as well as seeking a more meaningful life from a secular perspective. His passion is to support people as they cultivate resilient compassion and equanimity in the messiness and confusion of real life.
Yes.
I like it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it is. Yeah, thank you. It's really good to be here.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, it's great to have you. I had an interesting experience just on the way in here. We're in downtown Grand Junction. And on the way in, I'll share this little thing with you. I ride my bike all around town, and there was a gentleman on the sidewalk kind of taking up both sidewalks right in front of the studio where we record. So I went around and I said hello, and it was unfortunate, but immediately apparent just how much, I don't know, sadness, fear, frustration was in him, and he lashed out at me for saying hello to the point of saying, "You're the enemy. You encompass these bad things." So it was an interesting way to like come into this space that I usually think of as like, man, it's this time to share. But I was struck by how much frustration and sadness and anger there is in the world right now, and just wanted to pose that to you, because I think a lot of people are feeling that. And in your line of work, there's got to be all of those things. There's anger, there's sadness, there's everything. And how do we help be there for those people? Because, this may or may not have been a safe situation for me to be in. Unfortunately, I was not going to... I don't know that I was helpful, I guess, in the next encounter with a random stranger. I'll still try to acknowledge them and be kind, it's the best I can do. But I'm just wondering for you, how do we help people who are in just such a challenging space?
Wow. This is a phenomenal place to start, because as you read, like, life is messy.
Yeah.
It really is. And we have a lot of hope that when we help others, or when we're clear and kind, that they receive it in that way. But if they're feeling pain, if they're feeling fear, if they're feeling dejected, if they're feeling like others have walked all over them, or if life isn't fair, you might be the person that they express that towards. And it can be really upsetting. It can be really unsafe. It's a lot. And in those situations, because I certainly encounter them as a hospice chaplain, the word chaplain doesn't really have a clear cultural definition. People think I'm a minister, and they think that, I'm there with a religious an agenda. And so sometimes if they have religious pain, religious trauma, I get all of it. But what I find is in those situations, if I can show up and receive that, critique anger with love, but it's love for myself too. Not that I'm letting them walk all over me or endanger me, but I can receive that and say, you as a human being are worthy of dignity. You can have anger and response, and I can keep myself safe, but that I can receive it without fighting back, trying to get one up on you and say, no, you're at fault and here's what's wrong. Most people are amazed that they can be loved and respected for who they truly are. And so in that circumstance, and what I'm hearing and just perceiving in how you're sharing it, is you ultimately probably did something very kind to that man. You advocated for the need of the building that you're in and of the, sidewalks and thoroughfare. You were clear about, well, this is what I'm hoping for. He came back with anger and with probably more energy than that individual circumstance sort of would have called for. It probably brought with it, lots of other things. And you didn't have to fight him back. You could take and receive it and then have a safe boundary and say, okay, well, that's where we're ending. And so, in those situations, I really do find that if we can stay true and loving to ourselves, it's a phenomenal gift for the other person. In hospice, chaplains get turned down pretty often. It's one of the roles on the interdisciplinary team of physicians, nurses, social workers, CNAs. We are not a mandatory one. It is required by law to offer spiritual care, but the patient can say no, thank you. And so we get a lot of denials. But even when they turn me down, I know I am affirming their right to determined care. I'm allowing them to express anger if they need to, and I'm not coming back at them with judgment, with resistance. I'm saying, if you feel that way, that's okay. And if you need me, I'm still here. So, what a great story, Jamie. That's and when you hear my response, like how does that resonate with like what's in you right now?
It definitely resonates. I talked with the woman Denise that works here. We formed a friendship over the last couple of years of us doing the podcast here at the studio, and just kind of debriefed it. And it was I think initially just in my body like a little bit of tense. He was angry, really angry, and anytime you elicit that response, or for me anyway, there is a little bit of tension that's built up.
Yes.
I'm just getting off shift after a couple days, and there were challenges, there were a lot of challenges, and us going in as paramedics and EMTs and, firefighters, it's not always well received either. We go into these very challenging situations, and, we do, are very fortunate that a lot of people want us there and are grateful that we're there, but that is certainly not always the case.
Not always.
It's helpful to think about that way too. I guess it's almost like that idea of being on an airplane, like you put your own oxygen mask on first, and then you really have that desire to help others though too. So we put our oxygen mask on, help for yourself, and then really want to help the other person too. And hopefully you can extend that out.
Yeah, really well said, because even the analogy of putting on your own oxygen, that is not about self-care for self-care's own sake. It's actually the most practical way to do the most good, right? If you don't take care of yourself, now you aren't helping others, and you're possibly a greater burden. If I come into a conflict or a crisis and I don't realize that I have unprocessed feelings and anger or expectations, right? If I hear from somebody something that reminds me of a fight that I had with, my parents when I was 12, and I get all upset and angry. Now I'm trying to process some trauma on them and their process. And so being that non-anxious presence that can say, okay, this is not going how I wanted. And I'm even noticing anger and fear and disappointment, but I at least can see it.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to unconsciously act it out. It's a big thing that we as chaplains train in. It's called parallel processing. And it's really making sure that when you're meeting with somebody, you can learn to be aware of the very subtle ways that the body and the heart and the mind can show you that, like, hey, maybe you're not actually there with that person in that moment. Maybe you're off in a conflict with your wife 10 years ago, or maybe this person is reminding you of a teacher that you were trying to earn their approval. How do you see that? Set it to the side and come back to this moment and what is needed in this moment. And so, I appreciate that, especially as those doing difficult jobs, both physical and emotional, they are taxing. And we really need to be watching for, have I crossed that threshold where I can really still take care of myself? Or am I now way outpacing my own capacity? And if somebody does treat me poorly, or if something does go in an unexpected way, am I going to escalate this unnecessarily and make it worse?
Yeah, I like that thought of capacity, and I think it's not just an individual thing. Jamie has this capacity to care, to do this work. That fluctuates throughout the day, throughout my career. How do you personally go about checking where you're at. I mean, it seems like it's really hard in the moment. And maybe is that easier done, rewind a little bit before I get to this tense situation, or are there components both ways?
So you're absolutely right. I'd say the starting place is that ounce of prevention is so valuable, right? When I am visiting somebody who is dying or who is near death and their family might be stressed out, as I approach that doorway, that threshold, I just have a routine that there's a little pause. And I really try to reaffirm, okay, what am I actually here to do? What is real success? If they berate me for something that I didn't do that's unjust, but they feel heard and loved, is that a success? If they feel they have agency, is that a success? And so it's sort of checking first, where am I at, and can I do that? But I would also add, like any kind of training, we don't save it up until right before, right? So firefighters aren't doing push-ups and drills minutes prior to an important call. It's years, it's months of preparation prior. And I definitely find that contemplative practices, be it meditation or, centering prayer in the Christian world, or just silence, a daily practice of silence, can give you the ability to start to hear these more subtle parts of you, these little needs that in the busyness of the day often get overlooked, and in some people overlooked for decades. It's astonishing how many people realize too late, oh, I've been working this too much. I've overdone it, chronically. So I think, also having just a little bit of a pause in your day or in the schedule of your day can be a huge gift, because we sometimes don't know how tired we are until we sit down.
Yeah. I think one way of dealing with the emotional challenges can often just be to stay busy for folks, and I think that for me in younger years, that was the way, and that can go for years and years and years, where it feels uncomfortable to slow down and to reflect. People aren't always comfortable in that space. So it can be hard to get there. And I think, like you said, there's some studies even on Navy SEALs and people doing really hard work and really pushing. So we got, did this really hard mission, and to decompress, we're going to do more until we're exhausted. And then our endocrine system is just totally wiped out. Your hormones are all out of balance, and you're not where you want to be. You're not the person you want to be. And I think a lot of people in our profession could potentially look back, 20 years later and say, this isn't where I hoped I'd be, and not monetarily or, acquisitionally, but am I showing up the person that, when I was that rookie, that new EMT, that new firefighter that said, I really want to help these people. Do I still feel that, I'm
really happy to hear you mention that, because it is intoxicating. It is, comforting to hide from our limitations and to just keep pushing and keep pushing and keep pushing, and to show, no, I'm not weak, or no, I'm not needy. And especially those in the caring world, we can get this attachment to the identity of I'm the helper, I'm the solver, I'm the rescuer. And very slowly that can entrench the belief that it's not okay for me to be helped or me to be rescued. And it's incredible, because obviously it's not only an internal process, but our culture also pushes that. So often the people who I talk to are worried about productivity, worried about being a burden. And, often, even at end of life, so we're talking about people in their 70s, 80s, 90s often, this fear of being a burden is so powerful. And when we kind of dig deep, it's like, well, would you have taken care of your 80-year-old, grandfather? Well, of course, I would love to. That's such an honor. Why is it different for your grandkids? Why is it not okay for you to be in that role now? We just have a story in our culture, and especially in the caring, helping, saving profession, that we are the exception. I'm happy to help everybody else, but I shouldn't be helped. And it can really catch up to you later in life, when now it's such a habit. you can't even consciously break it. It's just entrenched and you're exhausted. Yeah. So I think that, hopefully catching it early or working in organizations that can give the invitation, saying to those young, EMTs, it's wonderful that you are full of energy and competency, but we also want to train you in the wisdom of not overusing these resources and tools. Just like a knife needs to be sharpened, you don't wear it down until it's dull. You pause and take care of that tool. I'm really gratified to hear that you have that perspective, because I bet that it is felt in the organization. Leaders have to model it because they have the perceived power and status. Right. It's really hard for a new hire to raise their hand and go, I actually need more time off, or I need more help. It's a very vulnerable space.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm struck by this quote that, and I'm going to blank on who said it, but everything works if you turn it off and allow it to, reset for a while and then turn it back on.
Good advice. Yeah. Have you tried turning it off and turning it back on?
Your world, hospice, we get to interact a little bit. Some of our folks on the ambulance actually get the privilege, I think, of taking people from the hospital to hospice and entering that space that's so different, from how we normally deal with death. I've been a paramedic for just about 20 years, and we fight it. We literally fight death, even in the oldest people who don't have DNR, who or the sickest people for whom death would seem like literally the most logical thing, that could possibly happen. And we fight it tooth and nail with, brutal. I mean, chest compressions are, they're a thing. And it's aggressive, to try to save someone's life. And when it's needed, it is absolutely needed. And that's where we start. So that's how we attack this problem. I'm using air quotes here. Your perspective has got to be so different, and I just want to.
Yeah, it is, and it's nuanced, because for some people, raging against that dark night is so important. They want to fight. They want to use everything, and that's fine. That's what they want. For others, there is a beauty in the acceptance and understanding that, it's time. I'm ready to die. Ultimately, it circles that core question of, do you know what you truly want, right? Because we have a culture that says quantity of life is all that matters. More years, that's better. And that's not true. We know that, that we know that quality also matters. And so, I've seen beautiful outcomes from people who wanted every possible second that they could have. And I've seen wonderful outcomes from folks who felt like, this chronic illness is really beginning to overwhelm me. I feel good now. I can speak to my family and share my values and my thanks and my love, and I'm ready to use, medical aid in dying to alleviate the suffering and leave on a high note. But in each of those circumstances, the determining variable is intention. It's not that there's a right way to die, because there's not a right way to be born. It's this messiness of the world that says ultimately it's on us. Our responsibility is to discover and to articulate and to adapt, if necessary, what our goals are and what our values are. And as you read in my bio, really my passion is helping people to find their own unique needs. There isn't a script, there isn't a checklist. And so, I have peers in this space who, often will, you kind of speak about paramedics and that violent language that you used about we fight death and, tooth and nail. And they kind of, push back there. And in my mind, I go, no, for some people, that's what they need to express. I fought till the very end and I feel great. And for some people, that's exactly what they need. The only place where I get worried is that that's become our default. in our culture,
Yeah.
right? That you have to articulate very clearly and have a lot of paperwork done if you want anything else.
Yeah.
And that leads to a perception that, oh, it's weird to want anything else. It's a strange or it's an inconvenient truth to want something else. And a lot of people have to work through that before they can accept it because they're worried. Is this being selfish? Should I be striving to fight more? I feel ready.
Yeah.
But and so I think that you called it out well. That it's it's two different paradigms.
Yeah.
What I love about hospice is at its best, it is really about saying to a patient and their family, we're here to support you with what you want.
Yeah.
And if you don't know what you want, we're here to give you options. We're here to give you counseling and time to figure it out.
Yeah.
And it's okay to even get it wrong because we can change at any time.
Yeah. I really like that. And I think we, as emergency services providers, can tend to go in with our own agenda. This is the way this call should go.
Yes.
And if we have the time and ability to kind of broaden out and think, what does this patient and their family, what are their goals of care? Where do they want this going? What's going to be most helpful in this situation? We had the opportunity, this is just last night, to spend a long time on a call for a patient that was having a psychiatric issue. The emergency room is not always the place for that. They had a lot of services in place that it took us extra time to call in and to help this person get to a respite care spot. It was challenging, and it took way longer than just load them up in the ambulance and go into the hospital. It was inconvenient, but it also, at the end of the day, it did feel way better. And one of our EMT that was there ended up hugging this patient as they left. They ran up, hugged the EMT, and just knew that, I don't know, it just felt like that was what needed to happen, even though we spent 45 minutes there. And there probably were some other calls that we could have gone on, but it felt better.
Jamie, I love that because on the other side of all that confusion and frustration and, are we wasting resources? Should we be moving faster? Should it be different? If we sink into that moment and we're sincerely with this other human being, even if it's just for 45 minutes, on the other side is that incredible catharsis of saying, I was truly there. Even if it had gone sideways, there isn't that regret of, well, I was trying to push this and should I have done that? And this, this agenda of my organization. In hospice, it's one of the things that I have really come to love, and it's just, me as an individual, but, nonprofit hospice to me is a layer, or it has one layer less of other possible conflicts and concerns, right? That for-profit motive to me just adds one more thing that people have to be thinking about. And it's hard as a human being. We always do want to do the best that we can, but there's all these conflicting things, and it's to sink into the moment and say, well, what does this human being who is in front of me right now need? And even if it's hard, even if it's inconvenient, it's ultimately so rewarding. It's really I was there, they saw me, and I saw them. And ultimately, in this era where, psychologically we speak about these crises of isolation and desperation, I think a lot of human beings are really just yearning to have that kind of sincerity in their life, that true relationship. So I'm very happy to hear that our fire department did that, because especially when there are mental health issues, it's very easy to get okay, I actually want to put more distance between me and this person. And it sounds like you and your crew said this actually calls for more closeness, for more intimacy.
One thing you were just discussing, Kevin, that I thought was a good observation, just this connection that you establish with your patients or your clients. How do you even?
Gosh, I think in different environments, it's a different word, right? I think patience is fine, but very often it's the people who I'm serving. So I think client is fine. Yeah, please feel free to use whatever is comfortable.
I guess that's, and maybe it's fluid, because I'm guessing you're using these same skills, and this has been a different way to live in the world and interact. And hopefully we're having some of this in this conversation, just this connection, and also this being here to, to support each other and hopefully bring something into the world. And not wanting to be somewhere else.
Yes.
Luckily, I don't have a meeting right after this.
And not planning lunch. And absolutely. It's like to truly be right here is the best gift that we can give to anybody. It's the thing that we all can pick up on very subtly when you're with someone and their mind is on their next thing, or they're, kind of shuffling papers or working on emails. We know, and we've evolved to know. We're extremely social creatures. And so we want to know, does this person actually want to form a connection with me, or are they keeping me at a distance? And especially those who are dying or those who are in distress, all those intellectual abstractions of, well, he's doing all the right body language, so maybe he's here, that gets stripped. And they can genuinely feel, just like as a felt, tangible sense, are you actually here with me? Or are you putting on some role, right? Like as a chaplain, it's very easy for me to walk in there and be like, oh, okay, I'm the spiritual guy. I'm going to be calm. I'm going to have these answers. And people pick up on that BS. They know you're putting on some show. What they usually want is, are you actually here to be with me in the midst of this uncertainty, in the midst of this mystery, of this suffering? And you might know, but it's something that has deeply inspired me, that the very word compassion, it comes from that Latin where passion means suffering. And to suffer with someone, to stay in the messiness and say, you're still worthy of love, even if I can't solve your problems, if I can't affirm that I'm competent and strong and you're the person who I'm taking care of, but I can be here with you, hopefully to give you some way of relieving that suffering, but at the very least, that I stay with you. That my presence is not probationary. You don't have to, like me. You don't have to agree with me, but that we can be here together. It's incredible what can happen. It gives people permission to truly be themselves. And at the end of life, but I would even argue throughout our entire life, I don't think that there's a greater gift. Yeah.
What does that do for the giver?
It's humbling because, as I hope I made clear at the beginning, we are imperfect. We do walk into a situation and I think about, I have to pick up my son, later, and I feel that pull away from this moment. So if I maintain the intention, inevitably I see all the habits and all the ways that I lose focus on that. And then I have to gently bring myself back. So it's very humbling because there are ways that I show up and I go, great, I'm in the moment, I'm here. And then all of a sudden there's this congratulatory voice. Oh, you're doing such a good job. I go, I am doing a good job. Like, wait a second, no, back to that person. And so, it's on the one hand very humbling, but on the other hand, it's extremely affirming of life itself, of the gift that we all bring just by being living beings together. That it's not a special thing that you have to train in. It's not a thing you have to attain. It's actually a relaxation back into just who you already are. And personally, it's given me this incredible confidence in that death and life, they work themselves out when we stop meddling. And it's not to say, I don't consider pain management meddling. If you really say, to be present, I do need help with this pain, I celebrate that, right? But it's to say, let go of all those stories of who you think you should be. You think what should be happening, and come back to what is truly important. So yeah, each and every person who I've served, each and every family has helped show me where I fail in that way, and also areas where I'm proud and excited that I could be there, even when it got challenging and frightening and messy. Yeah.
That's really cool. And I think I've felt some of that.
Yeah.
Many years ago, I never felt it and was always hoping to, oh man, I can't wait till I can ride my bike or go ski or something like that. And not be here, not be in this meeting, not be at work,
anywhere else,
and I could get glimpses when I did those. I skied a powder day. Oh, I got a glimpse of what it's like to be focused. And then I think what you're talking about, doing that in a conversation, to be completely focused and relaxed into that space and to know that you're exactly where you need to be right now. That's a pretty cool feeling.
It is. And it's one that, as I teach, meditation to either just community members or to people at, hospice, ultimately, even there, we have a story. Oh, I need to keep my brain quiet, or I need to feel peaceful. If that's not what is present, if that's not here and now, then that's not true. What do you feel here and now? And you can be present with a feeling of unfocus, of feeling chaotic and fearful. It's turning back to this moment and saying, what is true here? And sometimes what's scary is needs might pop up that are inconvenient. Things where you realize, oh, maybe I don't have the right training for this situation. I need to ask somebody else to come in. Maybe I have an unprocessed fear or pain that I should probably go talk to a counselor on. We're constantly turning away from the discomfort of who we actually are and trying to get to that thing that feels good. The bike ride, the skiing, the coffee and the donut afterwards. And that's not where life happens. Life happens right here. And real healing and real care happen right here too. And sometimes it's embarrassing. I'll share, there have been times where in the chaos of the death, the family looks to me and they ask this incredibly profound and important question. And I know I could give them some platitude that would address the surface. But the real truth is, I don't know. Or I wish it was different. And turning back to that lack in myself of saying, I'm sorry that I don't have that answer, but I'm willing to be here with you, even in that uncertainty, I think is a more profound gift, a more transformative gift.
Do you have a way that you've worked with to either help yourself or the people you work with kind of come into that space, inhabit that space? If there's still either you or they are somewhere else, they're in this anxiety of the future or regret of the past. Can you share just a short practice of how do you do that? I think
absolutely.
People are thinking, this sounds great. Sounds
in theory, wonderful.
Yeah.
I'd say there's a fundamental, just sort of philosophical starting point that before any practice, I think it is important to call out, and that is to understand that it's okay to be limited, to be not mindful, to be lost, to be anxious. Because we instantly judge that. We think, oh, I am denying it and I need to meditate or I need to do this to come back. And so there's already this very subtle judgment that it's not okay. And I really try to work with people to counsel that coping is worthwhile. When our body, when our heart, when our mind feel overwhelmed, it's a mercy that it's trying to make things a little more bearable by giving us a distraction. And so to start from the place that it's not some evil we overcome or some failure often allows people to have a little bit more softness and a little bit more willingness to actually look at it. Because if we just treat it like something to attain, to achieve, then every moment that we're not doing it feels like another reminder of how incompetent that we are. Sure. And so then people don't want to do it. So I really try to start there saying that the actual gift, the actual practice is noticing that we are doing it. That moment takes us out of that kind of dreamland of living in the future or in the past and brings us back to this moment. Oh, in this moment, I'm nervous and I am trying to escape by thinking about my taxes or my plans on Saturday. After you can accept it and actually see it, the two practices that I find to be really worthwhile, one is just to be in your body, just to find some part of yourself that you can feel So when I'm with somebody and I'm having a hard conversation, a part of my consciousness is just saying, can I even feel my feet on the floor? Like, is that sensation available to me? Or is all the blood rushed into my head because I'm worried that I have to have an answer for this or the perfect prayer, for this? And that brings some of that energy back down. And the cool thing is our body is always here and now. It can't go anywhere else. So it's a really wonderful anchor to just come back and go, okay, like, can I feel my hands on my legs or the rhythm of my heartbeat? And inevitably, that is just a really powerful way that we can calm down. So with patients who are beginning to get worried and anxious and the pain medication's not quite working yet, finding a part of their body where it feels safe to put their attention can be an incredible gift. And that can often just be in like a hand or, I've had people that just found like, well, this part of my nose, that's okay. Not this side because this hurts. But it's like, it's giving ourselves that permission to go there. And then the practice that I often teach that's more of an intellectual practice is called RAIN. And it's a meditation that's a 4-step acronym. And it stands for recognize, allow, investigate, and nurture. And what's really nice about having it as an acronym is working with medical folks and professionals. Acronyms are everybody's favorite, right? Yes, okay,
I can do that.
Yeah, step 1, step 2, and so that is a really beautiful process because it kind of shifts you back from just sort of looking at it through these fleeting thoughts and sort of sudden emotions where you think that you have really looked at it, to saying, I'm going to take 2 minutes and actually look at like, what is this feeling? So recognize is just to give it time to kind of, okay, I feel tension in my chest, or the same word or the same image keeps showing up. Then with the allow phase, for these 2 minutes or 5 minutes or however long you choose, I'm going to actually give it permission to be here. I'm not going to try and solve it or minimize it. Just going to actually let it be here. Once you do that, then you can just kind of gently and very, lovingly investigate. Well, where's this feeling coming from? When have I felt something like this? I had a client years back who called it the interrogate phase, and I was like, it's not that. It's not interrogate. And so as we gently just kind of ask it questions like, well, what do you need? And, how old are you? Or what are you worried about? We find that, similar to like a weed, the root goes very deep. It's not actually that in this moment we are fully experiencing this emotion from this one stimulus. It goes way back to something somebody said in 2nd grade or to a way that our, grandpa talked to us. And so if you can just notice that, now all of a sudden it gives you that little step back to say, okay, the whole story is not here, and then you nurture it in some way. And as I said, you're not solving, you're not minimizing, you're just kind of saying, okay, like, what is this feeling trying to tell me? What's the wisdom here? And what can I do to just kind of give it that space it needs to feel heard and seen, and then to maybe, make a promise to it. I'll come back tomorrow because I got to focus now on what this person needs, or I'm in a crisis, but I see you and I'll come back. And then, and you hopefully do because, like that's it's not a tool for sort of shunting things, but the RAIN practice over time will show us there are often several, core wounds or core themes that aggravate us more than the specific situation calls for. And that is the moment where we have a little bit of leverage. We see it finally, we go, oh, that's what's going on. So maybe I need some counseling, or maybe I want to journal on this, or maybe I need to, set up a healthier boundary so that, people can't trample onto that sensitive part of me that they don't even see because I didn't see it. Those would be the 2 things I often come back to as sort of like easy to use practices. Yeah.
It struck me that it seemed you were saying there's a lot of wisdom to be gained from these challenging experiences.
Yeah.
And I think we want to avoid them. I'm going over here.
Yeah, exactly.
I do not want what's coming down the pike. I want to control as much as I can to make sure these challenges don't arise.
Yeah.
I got my climate control. I got my
Yep.
nice new car that's not
Yep.
going to break down.
It's
I got,
all good.
it's all laid out. I got my 401k.
Yep.
I got my insurance. Like nothing bad's going to happen.
No, I've covered every base, and now I will never feel pain and fear and all of that. Well, and speaking from a spiritual standpoint, all of the great wisdom traditions come from that core question: what do we do with suffering? We're human beings. We have bodies. We have hopes. We have dreams. We feel pain. We feel fear. And that's where wisdom comes from, is when we look at it squarely in the eyes and don't treat it like something to be conquered. It's certainly wonderful to alleviate the suffering that we can. But when we think that we can conquer it, that we can expel it forever, only disappointment, follows. And I do think that there are a lot of people who can feel a strong sense of betrayal from, be it God or their body or, their family, that they are sick, they are dying. Well, I ate well, I did everything right. And it's like, yeah, well, it was never on offer that you wouldn't die. That was always there. But there was an illusion that was offered through physical wellness. There was an illusion that was offered through money. And if, saving that insight up until the very end of our life, when we are, potentially feeling low energy, when we have pain and confusion, is a tremendous gamble. The sooner in our life that we can reconcile and make a relationship with disappointment, with fear, with loss, that is actually what it initiates us into real life. That is the moment where we take responsibility for what is true. And it's definitely, I think, the biggest gift of the work that I do is every day I am reminded, oh yeah, it's coming for me too. It's I will feel grief. I will feel fear. I will feel pain. I will die. So how do I want to live today? What really matters here? And it's this incredible tool for ultimately, it's like sorts and prioritizes things so clearly when you just say, well, that's foolish. Like, why would I spend time doing that? I know that I don't have a guarantee of tomorrow. So what do I want to do today? Yeah.
That's really, I don't know. That's really interesting to think that it could. So we're taking this thing that in our culture is often thought of as morbid or sad, and saying this is an opportunity to live not morbid and sad, and maybe the polar opposite, like living like on fire, today, because I know I'm going to die. That's an interesting juxtaposition.
It's the paradox, right? Yeah. That like by actually turning into the skid, you can, sort of regain some control by allowing ourselves to see limitation and disappointment and grief. We can actually live more fully. And, especially in the professions of caring and of service, the thing that I see that is chronically the most sort of dangerous thing is the way we move on to the next thing as quickly as possible. We don't give people the chance to really digest and learn from what they just experience. That sacred moment, be it of a death or of an injury or even just a personal failure where you realized, oh, I really screwed up. It would be wonderful if as a culture we could say, that's where the gold is. That's where you dig. The Buddhists have a lovely saying that because the lotus flower grows out of these murky, sort of muddy waters, they say no mud, no lotus, right? We need those muddy waters to actually show us how best to live. And so, I really praise podcasts like yours or, organizational priorities that say we're in like a really profound and important sector, a really, important job. And there are incredible gifts on offer to us if we pause, if we can truly take it in and preferably do so in community. It's wonderful as an individual practice, and I highly recommend it, but it is absolutely transformative as a community practice if we can truly process our grief and our fear together. Yeah.
My wife's worked as an ICU nurse for a while, and she talked about working at 2 different hospitals. And one, they had that practice of stopping and basically just coming together to, acknowledge and be with one another for that, that period of time. And she misses that practice, And I think that's something we could do that we don't always do. I think we want to move on. I think it's thought of as like, protecting our heart. If we move on really quickly, go on the next call, and don't let that fully sink in or that, fully affect us, that might be a better way. And I agree with you. I heard this other quote that I appreciate, like in this line of work, I've seen hundreds, if not thousands of people die, my heart's going to break, Is it going to break open or closed? Is it going to seal shut and calcify so that I never allow anything into it? Or is it going to break open and, allow joy and allow some, hopefully, like you're saying, some wisdom from seeing all this pain to, help me flourish more. And I hope for that. Not saying I've gotten there every single time, but that's the intention I set.
It's one of the hardest things to hope for. And I really want to normalize. Sometimes the situation is overwhelming. We are not ready to dive in, right? It's better to just set it to the side and come back later. So I never want to, give the impression you need to jump in and like pick at that trauma. It is that we invite it forward in the right circumstances when we can process it. And then we stay in that window of tolerance that just like physical training, overdoing it or underdoing it are both bad. Finding that middle ground where I'm challenging myself, I'm opening to new possibilities, and then I'm recovering afterwards and I'm resting. And what you said about, a broken heart, it's absolutely, I routinely have people ask, like, how can you do this? And it's like, well, I don't know. There was nothing that I specifically can attribute to any kind of effort on my part that makes me able to work with death. But I tell people, my heart breaks constantly. I like these relationships that I form with people who are dying or with their families or with their, communities. It does shatter. I cry in my car, but, the image that you used of it, is it breaking open or is it closing down is so crucial. And the image that I always come back to, there's that Japanese art of kintsugi where they take, shattered pottery and then using a combination of lacquer and gold, they piece it back. And that's really how it has felt over these years is it shatters and then it comes back together. But the memory, the mark of that grief is this incredible gift, this loving, wisdom that this person, gave me, these memories of what truly in this life, mattered. So it feels like, it's shattered and it's in pieces, but there's these veins of gold there. And I wish that we could offer it more to people. And I also worry that when we try to close off to any one feeling, we typically end up closing off to all of our feelings, right? The people who refuse to look at their grief, their joy is diminished, right? They're shrinking that sort of window of experience down. And so it's a really powerful act to welcome as much of the real world as you can, because then the joys feel better. Then the gratitude is spontaneous, right? This is a personal thing that I do, but as a spiritual counselor and teacher, the act of like forcing gratitude, I'm going to do a journal and I'm going to, for me, gratitude is something that we should cultivate as a spontaneous action. By truly feeling grief and disappointment, gratitude shows up all on its own, right? If you truly feel the frustration and anger that your car didn't start, you better believe that, tomorrow after it's fixed, you're going to feel the full joy of like, my car started today. This is incredible. I had a person in a meditation. She was dealing with these like just terrible toothache, It was horrendous. And like the pain medication, it wasn't working, and her dentist had scheduled her out in weeks. And so she's like, how do I deal, with this? And so I was guiding her through a, meditation of just looking at that pain and sort of giving it some space to just be there, but without the resistance of saying, I shouldn't have pain and this is bad, I need to solve it. And she suddenly starts smiling. And it gets bigger and bigger. And I go, okay, I'm going to actually stop. Like, what did you just feel? And she said, well, the pain's still there, but I just felt like I truly realized and I experienced that I have 31 teeth that aren't hurting. And I have one tooth that is hurting. But those 31 teeth feel wonderful. Yeah. And I could feel those because I was open to the pain of the one. And that won't always work, and it won't always be that sort of a dramatic thing. But I really do feel like in our world, there's plenty of things that are hard and frightening and disappointing. And as as we started, fractious and contentious, but there's also so much beauty. Mm-hmm. And if we turn away from the stuff that is difficult, we also, in many ways, we turn away from the beauty. And so, I think that's really the lesson that death has to give us. Is it's like death and life are two sides of the same coin. Love and grief are the same coin with those two sides. Disappointment and joy are the same coin, just two different sides. And you don't get coins with just heads. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, it just doesn't happen. Yeah.
Being a relatively practical person. Yeah. Nowadays, I think we have so many ways of distracting ourselves or moving on quickly and not feeling whatever that is. If there is discomfort, how do we gracefully first move into it and then move through the discomfort so that it does open up the joy on the other end? How do we start that?
Yeah, it's an important question, because there is that sort of first movement. There is that sort of welcome that needs to happen where you go, okay, maybe I'll look at it just a little bit. And so, what I find often is saying that it's okay to have this, right? Even if you don't know it, subconsciously we are taught difficult feelings are uncomfortable for other people. They're uncomfortable for you. Maybe they're highlighting a limitation that you have. So we have to acknowledge that, like, this is not going to be easy. It's not that I am going to turn towards it and all of a sudden joy, shows up. You have to move through that and really digest it before you get to that other side. I really often, I recommend titrating and being very thoughtful about not overdoing it. It's easy, especially for those of us who are men, to be like, I'm going to solve this. I'm going to be the best, meditator. I'm going to be the most forgiving person. And it's no. Little chunks over time lead to far, better outcomes than just a single sprint. You'll burn yourself out. And so to, give yourself permission to have a coping mechanism, to say, I'm going to go home and I'm going to watch some reality television and I'm not going to think about that hard thing that happened at work. But I do have in my schedule time that I have carved out. Maybe it's just 5 minutes in the morning or on my drive home that I stop and I just spend 5 minutes being in silence or journaling to check in. What am I feeling? And what's actually there. And over time, what happens is you don't need to kind of willpower it and force it. It's actually very comforting to give yourself that gift when you're not demanding it all the time. That is, I think, what scares people about, be it spiritual practice or any kind of self-improvement, is that they think, I got to do this full bore and I got to do it for the rest of my life. And it's like, no, just give yourself permission to feel it, but to also set it to the side. Because as I said, coping can be a mercy. If the body's not ready to explore that, don't force it. But over time, I've seen again and again the fruits of that practice, of even just the little moment of silence. Typically, people experience it very positively and want to come back and want to do more and want to do more. In meditation, with folks who can't establish a real consistent practice, I say, well, then don't. Like, find some way that you can just, bring it into a couple of moments each day. Doorways are fantastic because there's like a psychological switch when we pass through a threshold. It's why we often will forget things. I was in one room and I walked in here and what happened? So it's like, every door that you pass through, just check in. Can I feel this one breath? Okay, and moving on. Or in the morning, do 30 seconds of breathing. Typically speaking, people then go, well, now I want to do that for a minute. Now I, don't just do it at doorways. As I drive, I like to feel, can I feel the vibrations of the road in my hand? Can I feel my posture? And it's pleasurable to, let go of that constant running from ourselves. But I say that with, as I said, absolute permission to say, but some days you just need, a Red Bull and loud music and you're focused there, and that's how you're going to cope. Yeah, right. But yeah.
Nice. We've covered a lot of ground, and we could talk probably for hours.
I think that's true.
I guess a couple questions for you to wrap up. Where do you find the most kind of hope in your work? What does hope mean for you, I guess, when you're at this, another threshold, people passing from this life?
Yeah, hope, my definition has really changed from the very sort of childish view that hope is that you'll get everything that you want, to hope and understanding that even the difficulties in your life can point to what really matters, can help to refine your priorities and teach you more. There was a ranch that I worked on where we had a wildfire ripping towards us. And in that moment, when you have 10 minutes to pack up a car, you better believe you realize very quickly, I care about that and not that. And you could have spent days and months doing an organizational system. Is this a priority? Is that? But in those moments of crisis and fear, there's a beautiful clarity that often comes forward. And I've seen that so many times in the dying process, that people who are willing to turn towards it and open themselves, to it, they almost become radiant with the clarity of, oh, this is what I love in this world. And those who enter hospice, it's, sort of an average, but it's usually that they have about 6 months. And those 6 months, they can become the most beautiful time of their life. So that gives me hope that even in hardship, we still are given this invitation to love, to beauty, to real life, that it's not a failure. It's actually this incredible gift in some way, and a gift that I wouldn't wish on anybody, but a gift sort of nonetheless. Yeah.
Nice. Very nice. I guess I want to know about some resources for other people who want to learn more in these areas that inspire you. Are there books? Are there podcasts? Are there TV shows? How do they, if they're interested in this sort of stuff, what inspires you and what would you recommend?
Yeah, so the book that got me into hospice, that I remember reading in my pickup truck on a ranch and going, am I going to work with people who are dying? Like, I feel called to this, was a book called The 5 Invitations, and it's by Frank Ostaseski. And he is one of the co-founders of the Zen Hospice Project in San Francisco at the peak of the AIDS crisis. This hospice extremely focused on this idea of like, this is a sacred moment that we can be present for people of all faiths, to give them a like deeply human experience. And his book is amazing, truly amazing. And it is the like, what are the 5 invitations that death gives us to live more fully? Incredible author. He's been interviewed on a bunch of podcasts. He also does, there's a bunch of YouTube of him. He's a phenomenal guy. So that's what I would recommend is like, just if this at all entices you, that book, I think, just offers such a beautiful entryway into this sort of a philosophy of being. The other thing that I would, just sort of point to is in the, world of, the of those guided meditations and things, that rain meditation is out there. It's not my invention. So if people are interested in that, you can just Google it. And, Tara Brach is this incredible teacher. It can be right on your phone. There's short ones and long ones. And so you don't have to do it yourself. You can just have somebody else sort of guide you through it.
Sure. That can be really helpful.
Yeah.
I find.
No,
when
she's
my
awesome.
mind is quite wild, somebody else to guide a meditation is very helpful. At this point in the game, what's one spiritual practice that's still important to you or that informs your everyday?
Yeah. I was thinking about this question because you were kind enough to have, you shared it early, and I was like, oh, maybe it's meditation or maybe it's, these styles of body practice. But really, as we've been talking, the most important spiritual practice that I really have is grief, is disappointment. It is that moment that calls me back to what is absolutely real. There's these loftier ways that we can get caught up in spiritual identity, but nothing brings us back to a more humble truth than those moments of, I screwed up or I lost something that I love. And so really, my answer now is that grief is probably the most important spiritual practice in my life. And I'm grateful that you helped me to articulate that today.
Yeah. Thank you. Absolutely. And is there something you've learned throughout your career that you feel could be beneficial to the well-being of other healthcare workers or people in general? Yeah,
this is a wonderful concept that I picked up sort of years back, but it's the difference that is between burnout and betrayal. And I'll articulate, or I'll say more there. So burnout is a very common thing that we talk about. It's important to find how we might be overexerting ourselves, under-resting, under-resourcing, and doing so chronically can lead to burnout. It can lead to the fact that we can no longer offer this because our body is just shot. Our mind and our heart are just shot. I love more organizations are offering trainings on that and helping people. Betrayal, I love this, is the way that organizations or systems incentivize or push us towards that burnout. They don't give us the space and resources. They overdo it. And so it's important to not, hear, oh, if you're burned out, it's your fault. Sometimes it's that what was asked of you by this system, by this organization, was inhumane. And that's okay to say, oh, actually, I, went in with good faith, but I was exploited in some way. And so it's a very, nuanced sort of difference, but it helped because, these nurses who I work with, they're incredible. They take on so much. And some of them, they receive the teaching of burnout of, oh, good, one more thing that I failed at. Yeah. I have failed at, taking care of myself. And that's not always, what happens. Sometimes the medical system drove them and said, well, here's what we expect, and here's the mounting caseload, and here's what everybody else has said yes to, so you should too. And it's not a personal failing. It's that they got pushed by the sort of system towards that outcome. And so that concept of burnout and betrayal, I think, is really important so that we know, am I dealing with something where I need to advocate for myself, or am I dealing with something where I need to advocate for change in my system? Yeah.
I think that's a really important concept for, administrators will be listening to these sorts of conversations. There can be an unwinnable task, and we do these annual check-ins with our counselor at work. Are we moving, into a space of feeling more whole, more healthy, or are we each year, it's an interesting rubric. Are we each year, shrinking, becoming more frustrated, a little more tired? Which direction are we moving in, and is that a systemic thing? Yeah,
that's wonderful to hear, because we don't have to seek out counseling or other resources only in crisis. Yeah. It's a wonderful tool to have another person, kind of check in and be that sort of, similar to a guided meditation, be that external force that says, well, let's talk about how you're feeling, and let's use that as a baseline that we can come back to, next year. And like any living system, the human being, we are never just stagnant. That there is no status quo. We're either, sort of growing and compounding in our wellness, or we are becoming more brittle. Mm-hmm. Those things, they build on each other. If I'm stressed out, I'm more likely to be sick. If I'm sick, I'm more likely to make mistakes and get injured. And it just keeps compounding. But if I'm feeling resourced and healthy, then I'm more likely to express my needs, and I'm more likely to get the resources that I might need for sort of different, and they build. So yeah, I think that's wonderful to remind people, to remind these administrators that even just small periodic checks can be an amazing gift. You don't have to rearrange the whole system. Yeah. It's bringing in a bit of, humanity to it.
Yeah. Well, it even sounds like good business, if you want to put it at that level. Like, are people calling off sick? Are they calling off unwell?
Yeah. I mean, turnover rates, rehiring people, lawsuits from errors. I think it makes great, business sense. And ultimately, to circle back to exactly sort of, where we started, hopefully each one of us does have the priority that as we look back on our career, we see, I contributed something, I didn't cause harm. And administrators, I hope, have that too, of just saying, I was there to, provide the foundation for all this great work. And it wasn't just that it made business sense, but it made me proud that I could, take care of these amazing people who take care of others.
Absolutely. Well said. Is there a practice you do when you exit a space? I feel like we've shared an amazing conversation. How do we close?
Yeah, I think that's an important one, because how we begin matters as much as how we end. And, really for me, especially in situations where something profound has happened, I come back to that importance of the pause, that one moment that says, I'm not rushing to the next thing. I'm actually savoring this. I'm here fully for even the sadness of the goodbye. I would talk to you for hours. It's been fun. And so my recommendation is just for a short pause, just for a breath that says, this happened, it's over, and maybe I hope that it happens again soon.
Yeah. Sounds good. We'll take that pause. Our listeners can fast forward if they want, but we'll encourage them to hang in for the few seconds. Kevin Watt, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate your time. That was great. Thanks for joining us on Going Interior. I hope the ideas shared here help you adapt to the challenges of your life and career. Please share and like this episode if you find it useful. It has been produced by Dirk Klingman and Ellis Thompson, with additional editing by Matt Schofield and contributions by Lainey Osborne and Stephanie Houston. This work is sponsored by the Grand Junction Fire Department and the GJFD Peer Support Team. Special thanks to 970 West Studio for sharing their space, equipment, and expertise. Take care, and please join us next time.